Welcome to today's hour-long video compilation filled with mind-blowing and entertaining stories that are sure to captivate you. Whether you're driving home, relaxing in your room, or even drifting off to sleep, this video is perfect for every occasion. However, be warned, these stories might just have you pondering and laughing uncontrollably until your cheeks ache. For your convenience, timestamps are available in the comments section. Feel free to use them to navigate through the stories and catch up on any you may have already heard. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest uploads. By doing so, you won't miss out on any of the exciting content we have in store for you. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you thoroughly enjoy the video. My boss is a tuck-in-your-shirt Nazi, among other things, so I found a loophole in the dress code where I don't have to tuck in my shirt. What things have you done by the books just to pee off your boss? Alright folks, so there's actually a story attached to the prompt, so it's like story 0 or story 0.1. I don't know what to call it, but we're just gonna jump in with that one, I guess. So let's get going. Little background story. My boss is a huge douche. All he does all day long is walk around and make sure everyone has their shirt tucked in, and generally be a negative prick who everyone hates. So I come into work on my birthday the other day, and my friend runs up to me and yells, "Kaizen 420, happy B-Day!" right in front of my boss's office. He looks up and says, "Kaizen 420! I'm thinking he's going to say happy birthday since he no doubt heard her. Instead he said, "Yeah, go ahead and tuck your shirt in, Kay?" And he does the hand signal like he's tucking in an imaginary shirt. So I say, "Okay, no prob, I just have to put my stuff down real quick and I'll take care of it." So I walk over to my desk, which takes approximately 7 seconds to get to. I go to put my stuff down, and as I am, he comes up behind me again and says, "Kaizen, I said to tuck in your shirt." So I quickly tuck it in, and as he's walking literally right by me, I say, "Sorry, I just had to put my stuff down first." And he walks by like I never said a word. Immediately, I bust out my HR manual and check out the rule on tucked-in shirts. Turns out you must tuck in all shirts except a Hawaiian shirt or a Guayabera shirt. Sorry for my pronunciation. So I take my butt to Walmart and buy 10 of those effers and wear the most obnoxious Hawaiian-looking shirt the next day. The second I walk in, he looked me up and down, glared, turned around, and walked away. When everyone asked why I was wearing such a ridiculous shirt, I told them about the loophole, and now half my office is wearing Hawaiian shirts, and it's driving my boss crazy. All within the guidelines outlined by company policy. So, what have you been able to stick it to the man by playing by their rules? I absolutely love stories like this because, folks, if there's one thing that you need to do whenever you get some new job, you need to know the rules. Not just so that you can follow the rules and not get in trouble, but so that you can use them to your advantage. Because if you end up having a boss who's a real piece of crap like that one, then use the rules for your own nefarious purposes. You have my blessing. Now let's read some stories about people who did just that. Story 1. I used to work at the Jaws ride at Universal Studios, Florida. Our uniform consisted of a blue t-shirt, jeans or jean shorts, white socks, and white shoes. The unofficial dress code had all of us girls wearing jean shorts and white knee socks. One summer I ended up working the Jaws ride and the Jungle Cruise at Walt Disney World simultaneously. I love Disney and had always wanted to work there, but I ended up finding it stifling with all sorts of silly and over-the-top rules. At the Jungle Cruise, you wear a khaki shirt, khaki shorts or pants, white socks, and brown shoes. One day I didn't have any normal-sized socks to wear to the Jungle Cruise, so I ended up wearing my white knee-highs, which looked ridiculous with the jungle costume. When I got to work, one of my managers flipped his crap, told me my socks weren't in compliance with the Disney look, the official policies on how to dress at Disney, and made me roll my socks down. It looked like I was wearing little white life preservers around my ankles and looked more out of place than they looked originally. I was annoyed, so when I went home, I scoured my Disney look booklet for the policies pertaining to socks. All I could find was that socks had to be long enough to cover the ankle bone. There was no maximum height. Hell, I could have worn white tights under my khaki shorts if I really wanted to. The next day, I wore my knee-high socks again as a small act of rebellion. The same manager was there and he flipped out. He actually pulled me into the office to write me up, but before he could get me to sign the paperwork, I pulled out my copy of The Disney Look and showed him that, while incredibly silly looking, my socks were perfectly acceptable, and that I would continue wearing them like that. And so I did. I looked stupid, but I didn't care. Working for Disney wasn't a pleasant experience in my opinion, and it was very liberating to know that I could at least wear my socks however the hell I wanted to. Magnificent. I love that. Because that's perfect. You're absolutely following the rules 100%, but your boss, who really needs to, maybe go see a doctor or, a tree cutter to get the stick out of his or her butt, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Do it. Do the thing that makes your boss upset if you're following the dang rules, because if they're being unreasonable, then just counter them by being extra reasonable. Story 2. Back when I was working and attending classes, I would go straight from campus to work, getting me there anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes early before my shift. On occasion, my boss would ask me to help him out with something before I clock on, putting something away, or answering the phone. Over the span of a couple months, this evolved from occasionally to every day your shift starts when you get here. After doing this for a couple weeks, still clocking in at my usual 3 p.m., I decide that if I'm working for a few extra minutes each day, I'm gonna get paid for it. I did this once, and I didn't make it an hour into my shift before my boss was screaming at me and throwing down the employee handbook saying that I'm only allowed to clock in 5 minutes before and after my scheduled shift. Needless to say, I made it a point to not check in until 5 minutes after my scheduled shift every day, no matter how early I was. Fast forward 3 months, and my boss gets fired. He got what was coming to him. It is in fact illegal for your employer to fail to pay you for doing any sort of work for them under the Fair Labor Standards Act, whether it's part of your normally assigned duties or not. Story 3. When I was working at an Office Max about 10 years ago, I was the only employee who didn't smoke. Needless to say, everyone in the building took a 15-minute smoke break 2 to 3 times a shift, and I squatted. One day I asked the manager if I could have a clean air break, and he was confused. I explained that since smokers can have their 15-minute breaks 2 to 3 times a shift, I should be able to step outside and do the same without having to smoke. Irked my manager, but he knew he had to let me to avoid any discrimination. This is such a better idea than what I did. I had a job where the only friends I had on the job were going out for smoke breaks, and they were going out 4 or 5, maybe 6 times a shift to have, a little 5-10 minute smoke break out back of the factory we were, factory's a shop, whatever. And so to go out and hang out with them, I just started smoking. Don't do that. I smoked from probably 26 until I was 30. I don't really smoke anymore at all. Maybe an occasional cigar, once every couple of years. But, yeah, this is a smarter way to get those breaks. Story 4. While I was in the Navy, it was recommended that I get an extensive surgery on my ankle. My command felt that I didn't deserve a bunch of time off for a surgery, so they said they would approve it, but none of the convalescent leave. They refused to sign any paperwork. First thing I did was hit them with the regulation stating that they were required to respond to all requests within a certain amount of time, 3 days, I think. They respond with a no. So then I had Navy Legal draw up paperwork with accordance to regulations that my command would be responsible for 100% of my medical care if they did not abide by doctor's orders. I then let them know that would mean that all of my medical care would then be handled by civilians and the command would be responsible for paying the bill out of their budget. They approved my surgery, convalescent leave, and convalescent leave extension. Story 5. On the flip side, I'm the boss enforcing policy. When I took over the department, the old boss told me that the reason the place looked like crap was because when he asked a sales associate, base pay plus commission, to clean or put up stock, they claimed it wasn't in their job description. The main boss backed them up, calling it a technicality. I pulled out the description and read out other duties as assigned by the manager on the last line. 2 out of 9 quit. My department is now clean and stock is always up. Sales are consistently up. I'm cool with that. Story 6. Not really my boss, but my school principal, who was really like a boss to me as a kid. I was at an Opus Dei school, so the nuns were pretty effing strict, and I hated the effing salads they gave us. I found multiple ways to hide the food because you can't throw food when there are millions of people starving, until one day I just went with a tray half full to dump it all. The nun went ballistic, and I just said, "I'm full. Gluttony is a sin," and threw it all. That got me in trouble. I was 9.
Oh, see, that was your mistake, though. Of course you still got in trouble, because you actually brought up a rule that was in the Bible. It's a Christian school. They don't care about the rules in the Bible unless it, benefits them. There are plenty of good Christians out there who are not like that. But I think we all know there are plenty of Christians out there who are like that.
Story 7. At a former workplace, the dress code was changed. Men were no longer allowed to wear shorts. Women could wear skirts. I started wearing a kilt because skirts were okay in the rule book. Same thing happened at my school. Several guys wore kilts for a few days, then all on the same day, about half the guys in the whole school wore skirts. Lady skirts. It was wonderful. Story 8. When I was in grade 4, pizza was sold at lunch for $1.50 a slice. I saw a business opportunity and went to the Little Caesars a stone's throw away from school and bought 10 hot and ready $5 pizzas and sold the slices for $1, $1.25 on Friday. When the school told me I couldn't sell pizza on school property, I moved my office to my aunt's house, which was next door, so every day at lunch, the kids would walk to the neighbor's front yard, buy pizza, and come back to school. I was making a tidy sum every day. Story 9. When I worked at Best Buy, the dress code was black shoes, pants, belt, and tucked-in blue shirt. I never wore a belt nor tucked my shirt in because as a chubster, when kneeling and organizing DVDs on the bottom shelf, the shirt comes untucked and the belt cuts into my belly. First world problems, huh? Anyway, my boss would constantly freak me out for not having my shirt tucked in and finally get on my case for not wearing a belt either. So I checked the dress code, found it said belt if there are belt loops on the pants or something, so I found an X-Acto knife and cut off my belt loops. The next morning, I come in and she says, "Where's your belt?" I grinned at her and said, "Where's my belt loops?" and gave her the biggest crap-eating grin I could muster, one of my finest moments. Except your pants look stupid. Story 10. I used to work for this small town twice a week. The editor and publisher, mayor, county commissioner, and a few other people were skimming tax dollars. When I confronted my boss about it, he told me he'd blackball me if I said anything. So I went to the local television station, tipped them off, and they uncovered the story. When they won their awards, my name was added to the list of reporters. I still can't get a job as a journalist, but damn if it didn't feel good.
I mean, I don't even know if this is like finding a loophole in the rules to get away with something, because, I mean, you kind of didn't get away, but you went against what your boss told you for moral reasons, for the greater good. And I think that might be even better than my, vengeful, evil little, delight that I take in these other stories. You're just doing the right thing, and that's awesome. Great.
Students, what's the craziest thing you overheard when the principal forgot to turn his mic off after an announcement?
I mean, I know it has to happen at some point in time, but this is like a sitcom plot or a movie plot. I remember an episode of American Dad that featured this whole you forgot the mic was on, it kind of amazes me that this happens, but it shouldn't, because people are really good at doing stuff like this. I mean, over mics, over Zoom meetings, over whatever. Folks are just real bad at making sure that stuff is muted. Not me, though, because I know how dumb all the stuff that I tend to say is, and so I am paranoid about that. But these people aren't. Let's read about it. Story 1. We were the worst school in the state. Absolutely the worst. Constantly failing exams, bullies all around, fights during most lunch breaks, the usual. Naturally, it takes a real army-like principal to keep everyone in place, and our principal was not far off from that stereotype. He was the only person in the whole school that could actually discipline us. The teachers didn't stand a chance. He was always on point with a strong voice and sharp attitude. His attitude was quite explosive, and he was not really well known for his patience. Also, he used to have bags under his eyes all the time. We used to make fun of him with my colleagues that he doesn't go to sleep and just roams around the school corridors at night. The morning announcements over the microphone felt like a motivational talk every time. He kept saying, "Do your best, never give up, chase your dreams." Basically the most corny stuff you can think of. We were all wondering, for how long can this guy keep this up? Also, why is he doing it? Most of the time it didn't make any sense. Anyway, one day it all started to unravel. He did his usual announcement, rambling on about random stuff completely unrelated to school. However, at the end, he forgot to turn his mic off. All we heard next was and then yelling. I knew what was going on, and probably everyone else knew as well at that point. The mic was quickly turned off afterwards, but it was already too late. That explained everything. The guy was doing candy. I mean, how else can you cope with such a wonderful school, right? The struggles of being an adult, I guess. So this explained his switched-on explosive behavior, his random motivational speeches at 9 a.m., and his tired eyes all the time. I thought, why haven't I thought of that sooner? Anyway, we got it confirmed a couple of months down the line that he was buying from Big Jerry. He was quite big. Jerry was your usual school bully, stupid as a rock, and known for dealing stuff left and right. Despite his ignorance, he always managed to pass his exams, sometimes even having really good marks. So this explained everything. He was dealing candy to the principal, and in return, he would pass his exams. Fun times! Sometimes I wonder how I was so naive thinking that adults actually got their lives together. I mean, this makes me wonder just how many adults I knew as a child who were really energetic or intense or whatever. And I always thought oh wow, that's just their personality. I wonder how many of those adults were enjoying candy, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, yeah. Story 2. We were in school and it was close to summertime. So, the atmosphere tends to get more relaxed near the holidays and whatnot. We used to get announcements over the microphone from our school principal every morning. Your usual stuff such as today's menu, the agenda, and so on. Most of the time he was so boring with his announcements that we didn't even pay attention like most kids do. However, this morning was a different one. The principal goes live with his usual announcement. His voice could be heard on the entire school premises, even in the bathrooms. Gosh, there's no getting away from that guy. He goes along with the announcement. He delivers it, and the odd thing was that the announcement didn't end with the usual sound tone that notifies the disconnection. So this meant that he had not turned off the mic, and we could still hear him, even in the bathrooms. Two voices were talking distant from the microphone. It was sort of muffled, but you could still make sense of what was discussed. One of the voices was clearly the one of our principal, and the other one was not so clear. The principal was saying all this stuff about how we are annoying little kids, and how he was looking forward to the summer holiday so we could get the hell away from his school to leave him at peace. He went on and on about how tough this year was and how it was all our fault and he was feeling miserable. After hearing that, everyone was silent. We simply didn't know how to react. Teachers, students, all silent. So we thought, let's make the old man regret his words. If he wants trouble, we'll give him trouble. I lost my place. Last day of school was complete anarchy. It's like all the students turn into savages. Broken furniture, eggs thrown on the walls, flooded toilets, you name it. We were usually normal types of students, usually not causing a lot of trouble. For some reason, his messed up announcement woke up the delinquents in all of us. We gave him a show for him to remember throughout summer, and at the end, we grabbed our books and burned them in the schoolyard. Next year, we found out he was fired because of the property damage he was responsible for. It was his school, after all. God, I miss being a student and getting away with stuff. I don't know if I believe that one or not. It really escalated. We burned the books. We started our own Lord of the Flies island with the conch shell and kill the pig and smell his blood. And we raised the earth and brought forth an army of the undead to trample the city. Like, tone it down a little bit. And boy, if you all did do that, you gotta calm down. Sometimes people just need to vent.
Story 3. We had this principal once who was quite funny, really laid back and open-minded individual. Everyone around school liked him very much and thought he was really cool. You could see that he was a genuinely nice guy and he was doing his best for the school to do well. One day we got told the school unit was going to be sold to a rich guy that wanted to turn the school into a private institution, basically messing up the whole structure of our education and wiping out our academic history. Money above everything, I guess. Anyway, we thought this was only a rumor, but later we got confirmation the deal was going forward. Apparently, the teachers had something to do with it because they complained about their salaries, so they have conspired against the principal. One main guy got a hold of this, and he wasn't going down easy. In the morning, just in time for the principal's daily announcement over the microphone, we could all hear our principal going over the usual agenda. As he was coming to an end, he made a short pause and he continued, "In addition to the specified menu, we will also have desserts to help us cope with all the salty people." Everybody stopped and listened. He proceeded, "Do not forget to study hard for your upcoming exams. You'll feel better about yourself, but your results won't matter anyway because the school will be run by people giving out diplomas based on financial contributions, not academic performances. Also, remember to be nice to your teachers because you never know when they might stab you in the back. Also, let's not forget about Sharon and the new gym teacher. His office is not as private as you think. Send out a positive example to the kids rather than failing more than your students do on every exam. John, my guy, you still remember when the family cooked for you during Christmas because your wife left you and you didn't know how to fry an egg? Yes, good times indeed. Oh, and James, how are your A meetings going? Are you still blaming your addiction issues on your students?" Everybody was in awe, and sounds of laughter could be heard from every classroom. Finally, remember kids, the only person to trust is yourself. Principal Louise out. Now that was the funniest and most inspiring moment from school. I probably learned more during his speech than I did in most school years.
I mean, on one hand, I get it for the teachers. Teachers are typically pretty underpaid, and I think that they would want the money, but at the same time, is this how things work? Like, I don't know. This feels like something out of a story or something like that. I don't know, but I mean, if it really did happen, hey, good for you, Principal Lewis. I never know how to pronounce those names with how that's spelled, but sounds like you had good morals, so good on you.
Story 4. Imagine this perfect principal. Your ideal family man is always dressed sharply and charming, truly a heartbreaker. It was morning and it was time for the routine announcement. He went over the usual school agenda over the microphone. Everybody in school could hear him. That was the whole point of the announcement anyway. Suddenly, in the middle of his speech, his phone rang. He started to talk faster to end his announcement and then thought he was going to hit the button to end the transmission. Unfortunately, or luckily for our entertainment, he turned up the volume rather than finishing the button to end the transmission. He answered the phone and his tone changed to something quite delicate. He went on saying, "You shouldn't have called here. You are naughty. Someone is going to get punished tonight." We couldn't believe what we were hearing. He went on saying, "My wife doesn't know a thing. This is so exciting, but please don't call here again. My secretary might be listening to my calls. I think she also stole a pack of cigarettes. Probably need to hire a new one. God, I can't wait to see you tonight. Should we meet at the hotel like we always do? Oh, snap, hold on. I think I made a terrible mistake. I'll call you back." The transmission then stopped, and so was everyone else. I thought to myself, this can't be real. This only happens in movies. For the following weeks, there were no other announcements. They simply stopped. Months later, our principal resigned. His personal life was probably not in a good place either. Ironically enough, it was the secretary taking his place as the school principal. Maybe now she could afford her own cigarettes. Story 5. Boys in our school had a tradition of bringing alcohol to school in our last week of school. Why study when you can have fun, right? So every year, all the boys came with a bottle of something, probably stolen from their parents or from the store. After classes, we all got together in the woods and celebrated the summer ahead of us. We were truly a lost generation. After doing this for several years, the teachers and principal got wind of our unusual habits, so here we were approaching the end of the year. Everyone kept the tradition and showed up with bottles. Little did we know, we were compromised. They have organized a checkup at the main entrance. All the bottles were confiscated, and the students responsible for this were put down on a list. The following day, our principal made an announcement over the microphone. He told us that all the students involved in this initiative are going to get detention for the whole first semester in the next school year. He was quite mad about the whole situation, as you can imagine. After he finished the announcement, there was a technical issue with the speakers. I don't know how to explain it, but basically the mic was still active, so you could hear everything that he was saying. His words were, "I can't believe the amount of alcohol these kids drink." He could have been talking to his assistant. He continued saying, "Now that I think about it, I have all the alcohol stock ready for Christmas. There's so much of it. Let's have a quick drink now, Michelle. We deserve it. It was such a rough year." The whole situation was totally unexpected and quite funny. Hearing behind the scenes like that gives you another perspective on who really runs the school. Next year, when we started school, we found out the principal was fired for drinking on the job. Probably someone snitched because they wanted to go for his position. This meant no detention for any of us. Happy days all around. So the tradition continued, but the microphone announcement stopped due to the faulty technology the school was having. Truly miss those days.
I mean, folks, you realize that, you don't have to say the most incriminating things the moment that you think you're off mic. You realize you could just be like, I shouldn't say this anywhere near a microphone, whether or not I think that it's currently hot, you know? Maybe just step into the next room or something. You are all so quick to be like, I gotta say this incriminating stuff now!
Parents, what is one secret that you know about your child that could ruin their life?
Story 1. Little content warning with this one, folks. It does involve assault, and so if you are uncomfortable with it, please just click on the timestamp on screen right now, and you can move on to the next, less harrowing story. I was assaulted when I was 4 by my babysitter's 13-year-old son. I don't think my parents ever meant to tell me because I brought it up once, and my mom says, "Oh, you remember that?" "Yes, Mom, I remember seeing a penis shoved in my face. I also remember coming upstairs from their pantry. They were Mormon and had the huge butt pantry with food to feed the entire family for 7 years or something, and getting yelled at from the babysitter because we weren't supposed to be down there. I remember going to see a counselor, kinda. At least I remember her name. I also remember being in a pink leotard. I was in dance, talking to my parents, but I don't remember how it came up or what was said. I brought it up last year. I'm 27. Tales, but if you're a kid, I get not telling details, but if your kid has a memory like this, talk to them about it. Don't hide it and make it a bad thing. Obviously don't normalize it, but talk about the reality of it and let them process their feelings. Let them know what happened if they ask and are really old enough to understand, or at least let them know based on age-appropriate conversation. I'm not mad how my parents handled it when I was younger. They did well from what I do remember. I just wish I knew more now, especially since he did other things to other girls, but I don't know what. All I know is he got in trouble, but somehow it wasn't for what he did to me. What was really effed up was when that family sent us an invitation to his wedding. And I just wish I knew more about the sequence of events so I could better process it, how my parents found out, etc. I do have flashbacks sometimes, especially in intimate situations. I can't really do the same act now because of it, especially when pressured. I mean, I'm A, extremely sorry you went through that, and B, I guess from a parent's perspective, I kind of get it, because, as a parent, you would maybe hope, like, 4 years old, maybe they forget, maybe their brain is washing that away, but that is really an age where kids start to hang on to stuff. But yeah, I mean, how does a parent go about broaching that subject, I mean, like the OP said, if the kid brings it up first, it might be important to talk to them about it, because otherwise they're going to be reliving this repressed, awful memory and not knowing. So yeah, that's tough. I'm sorry. Story 2. When I was in 7th grade, I think, I was becoming increasingly suspicious that I might have some sort of mental issue, as I've always had severe problems when it comes to socializing, and I was realizing that a lot of the things I did as a small kid were kind of weird. One day, my sister told me that my mom accidentally mentioned something about me being autistic. Now, this wouldn't have meant much to me, but at that age, all I knew was that it was basically a mental disorder and scared the pee out of me. I asked my mom and she denied it, but the pieces started coming together and I realized when all the counseling was about when I was little. One day I was given a form to take to my parents. I decided to take a peek and unsurprisingly saw that autism was checked in the list of conditions. 5 years later, as far as I know, my parents still think that I just accepted my mom's answer and don't know what I know. I've never brought it up since, and though I've gotten far better and I'm now actually a pretty social guy, I was a bit messed up for a while. I had really known the perception of what was okay and what was not, and the idea that I was simply insane or something caused me to not care. I only started showering regularly a couple years ago, and I have absolutely rotten teeth due to lack of dental hygiene for years that still really isn't that great. Weird thing is, I never even really noticed how strange I was a few years ago. Typing this up has revealed just how severe it was, considering it's actually a very mild case of Asperger's or something like that. I'm way better off now and everything turned out all right, but I was near falling into severe depression several times and I have no clue how bad things might have been. I wish my parents would have just explained it early on. Yeah, parents, I know it might be a little bit of an awkward conversation subject to broach with a kid, but it is important to let them know. And I mean, there's no shame in having autism. I have people in my life who have autism that they're just people. It's just people. It's just another of a list of things, I mean, you shouldn't, by a parent avoiding telling and denying that, you make it seem like it's this awful thing, and it's not. Parents, just talk and communicate with your kids about this kind of stuff, please. Content warning on this one as well. Once again, it is discussing assault. So if you aren't comfortable with that, just scroll on to the timestamp that you see on screen right here that my awesome editor Natoy's put up. And that way, you're not going to have to hear about this story.
Story 3. I know exactly this kind of secret about someone, although I'm not their parent. Here's the story. I'm friends with 2 girls who are sisters. I'm fairly close to both of them, and the older of the 2 has been fairly open with me and told me various personal things about her life. The most personal of these things is that years ago when she was a toddler, her parents sometimes left her at the neighbor's place for an hour or so when they were busy or had errands to run. It turns out that the neighbor was a child molester, and he would spend his time with her touching her in various inappropriate and illegal ways. It wasn't until years later that her parents found out, and the guy was prosecuted and jailed for a very long time. And it turns out he had molested other small girls as well. What nobody else knows is that he molested both of these sisters, not just the older one. The younger sister was too small to remember, but the older sister has since told me the story. I'll never mention the story to anyone else, other than semi-anonymously on the internet without mentioning names, but I imagine if the younger sister found out, she'd be pretty upset. Story 4. Not my child, but my nephew. My wife and his sister were close as kids, but drifted apart as they grew up. Her sister's friend at school had a totally transforming influence on her. Different clothes, experimenting with I don't even know what, etc. I guess it's not unusual for some people to go through phases, but this was more than that. She ended up marrying one of her school friends after graduation, and my wife and I got married around the same time. We both have kids around the same time. You think maybe this would bridge the divide, that maybe my wife and her sister would reconcile and our son and our nephew could play together, grow up knowing their cousin almost like a brother. Nope. My wife's sister and her husband still hadn't come back to normal after their school days, and my wife didn't want anything to do with them, not that I blame her. About a year after the kids were born, we awoke in the middle of the night. We were afraid this sort of lifestyle would end up with my wife's sister or her husband dead. Never thought it would be both of them at the same time. Next thing we know, our nephew has no other relatives and he's living with us. We tell him they died in a car crash and that there's no such thing as magic. Story 5. My 9-year-old son doesn't understand the implications of his cystic fibrosis, that his life will be shorter and he'll never father children. One day I have to explain this to him and his younger sister. Honestly, sometimes it's harder for me to cope with than everything else. That my daughter probably won't have her big brother around when she's older.
I mean, I'm not a parent. I have nephews and a niece, but I can't imagine how difficult this would be for you, because obviously you do want to let your son know eventually. It's important. It's going to maybe shorten his life. It might affect how he approaches life and all that stuff. But yeah, I can't imagine there being an ideal time to have that talk. So I wish you all the best with it, OP. I hope it goes well. And I hope your son and his sister, your whole family, I hope they're able to live an amazing life with whatever time you've got with them.
Story 6. I have the opposite problem. When I was a child, my mom started to tell me a story about me that apparently had something to do right after I was born, but my dad stopped her and said he doesn't need to know about that. Last I've heard of it, the eerie feeling you'd imagine hasn't quite worn off, and this was 30 years ago. Story 7. Other way around. My father was a great hockey player in my town and played quite well throughout university. I still get told all the time by everyone from my hometown how great of a hockey player he is, and I should be proud, and they don't know how he never went to the bigger leagues. Well, I was moving my grandparents to a nursing home and stumbled on a letter from a university offering him a full scholarship to go play hockey for them. They never told him because they didn't want him to leave the family farm, and as far as I know, he still doesn't know about that. Like, at least 30 years have gone by. Now my grandparents have passed, and I still haven't told him. If my parents ever tried to hide an opportunity like that from me, I think I would disown them.
There's a lot of stuff that I can at least kind of understand a parent keeping from their kid because they think it's for the best or whatever. And they're probably not necessarily right, but you can at least kind of get it. But when you take away such an amazing opportunity from your child, especially the opportunity not only to do something that they love, but get like free college and all that, I really have a hard time sympathizing with people who could do that. I know they want them on the farm and it's still probably founded in love, but yeah, I know if I found out my parents had done something like that to me, I would be furious, and I don't know that I would want to forgive them.
Story 8. Something I will probably never tell my daughter. Her father wanted me to abort her. I almost did. I changed my mind a few minutes before the procedure. Her dad didn't want anything to do with her for the first few years of her life. Now he and I share custody, and he's a great dad, but if she ever found out that her father didn't want her and that's why he wasn't around in the beginning, it would devastate her. So it's something her father and I promised to keep to ourselves. Story 9. My mother decided to wait till I was 20 years old to tell me about the time I cooked my pet goldfish in my Easy Bake Oven because I wanted to make them seafood. We were in a store and I noticed they were selling Easy Bake Ovens, and I commented about how those things were still around and how I kind of remember having one when I was a kid. And she proceeded to tell me the reason why they took it. Story 10. To turn this slightly on its head, I was nearly 2 months premature, so was brought straight to intensive care when I was born. Nobody bothered checking. This being Ireland in the early 90s, when they thought I wasn't going to make it, I was rushed off for an emergency baptism, and my mom, who had a feeling that I was going to be a girl, told the nun that she wanted me named Martha. It wasn't until she was speaking to the doctor, who kept referring to him, that they realized. In the end, my dad had to burst in on the baptism, forever hold your peace style, and catch them before I ended up Marty for the rest of my life. I love the story, mind you. It's not quite ruining your life stuff, but it still makes me chuckle. What's the best way you've seen someone rebel against school rules?
Story 1! During my senior year of high school, 2008, my school got super strict about cell phones. It got to the point that we weren't allowed to have them out during any point in the day, not even during our lunch period. They claimed that we would send each other test answers or something like that. Anyway, a friend of mine who was a year below me was tired of the rule and how rude teachers were when enforcing it. He literally took his phone to check the time and got it taken from him for the rest of the day. That next week, he comes to lunch with two older/non-functioning flip phones. He takes the first out and pretends that he's talking to someone on it. A teacher was instantly on him. They walk over and hold out their hand for him to give it up. He looks at the teacher and then proceeds to break the flip phone in half and puts it in their hand. The teacher was speechless. She just walked away without saying anything. He takes the second phone out and does the same thing again. The second teacher thought it was pretty funny. Flash forward to 2015 and I start working at the school as a student mentor, and now everyone is allowed to have their phones out pretty much at any time. How things change. Well, my senior year of high school was 2001-2002, and we didn't have cell phones for the most part. I did. I had a job, and I put it towards getting, at first I had like a big phone, like it was a brick about this big. You could kill a person with it. But eventually I got a Panasonic phone that was like the size of a little candy bar. But I never used it in school because literally no one I knew had a cell phone. So what was I going to do? Play Snake all day? Nah, I got better things to do. And also, I eventually flushed that Panasonic phone down a toilet. Story 2. I was at a private school that had rules about the length of boys' hair. One guy in particular always ignored the rule, and the administration would tell him to get a haircut every so often, but he never did. Eventually, when his hair got down to about his shoulders, the principal pulled him aside and told him his hair was twice the allowed length, and by next week it needed to be shortened by half. Monday rolls around and he comes in with half his head shaved and the other side as long as ever. We were impressed by the literal interpretation of the principal's request, but it still ended up with him getting a suspension for a week, and he had to shave the other side before he could come back. I went to a private school that told me I couldn't have hair past my neck. I loved having long hair, so I did it anyway. They told me my hair had to change over the weekend, so I dyed it pink, which was also against the rules. Long story short, I'm no longer at that school. Should have tied the hair and made a bun out of it on top of your scalp. Technically, it wasn't past your neck. He should have just combed the other half over. This is not a problem that someone like me has really encountered. That's actually not true. Back in my 20s, I actually had hair like down to here, but you'll never see. I hate schools that have hair rules. My gosh, do they just feel so puritanical and outdated. Just let kids do whatever they want with their hair. It's one of their, few forms of expression. They get hair and clothes kind of sometimes. God's sakes, adults, you're real stuffy buttholes.
Story 3. After 9/11, my school made a rule where we had to wear our school IDs. They went overboard, quickly handing out detention to anyone who didn't wear one. One kid had his ID blown up and put on a shirt. On the back it said, "Yes, I'm wearing my effing ID." He got detention for not wearing it with the shirt. They're bringing back all that ID stuff where I go. Why don't they just tattoo identification numbers on all the inmates? I mean, students. We had to do that after Columbine. Some genius decided that they should have our picture, name, year, and full address printed on the front and had to be worn on a neck lanyard at all times. Even when teachers with children at the school complained, the administration didn't want to backtrack. They threatened students who obscured the info with stickers with punishment for vandalism. Then suddenly it all went away. I wouldn't be surprised if the school district lawyer had some concerns. We had to do that too, but then everyone started using them as weapons and whipping the crap out of each other in the hallway, or Indiana Jones snapping it at some Peters. It lasted less than a year before they took them away. Story 4. My high school was always issuing new dress code rules for the girls. Miniskirts had to be longer than your arm, no tube tops, etc. One day, all the boys dressed in drag, breaking all the rules. No violation because the dress code specified only girls. That's BS. If you got long ape arms, you gotta wear stuff down to your knees. If you got short butt T-Rex arms, you can't just walk around in your underwear. Story 5. Elementary school had a ban on extreme hair colors. My brother showed up with fire truck red hair. Principal stops us both as we're entering the school, and she's going off on my brother. She's berating him, saying, "Who do you know that has red hair like that?" Without skipping a beat, Ronald McDonald. The principal just grabbed him and drug him into the office. My 4th grade brain was in shock that he just one-upped a grown-up like that. She called my dad, and he promptly didn't give an F, and months later, bro went from red to green to purple.
Folks, I gotta tell you, while you've got hair, have fun with hair colors and wild hairstyles. I've had red hair, blue hair, green hair, black hair. I've had like a calico hair. That one wasn't totally on purpose, but I did it. Have fun with it, because eventually it might start to thin, and you might feel your youth kind of just fading away from you like sand, like teardrops in the rain. So have fun while you can, please. You have to have fun with your hair before it's gone.
Story 6. Okay, so we need to have clear backpacks, right? This kid puts quite the vulgar image depicting the counselor on one of his notebooks and packs it against the edge of the pack. Guns and drugs, the kind of thing that kids aren't supposed to have, so they just toss them into their backpack loose, and not wrapped up or stuck into a book or something. Story 7. Hey Joe, aren't you supposed to be in class? Yeah. One word. Doesn't look like much in text, but he said it with such full acceptance and resolution that the teacher didn't follow up or say anything else, just, "Okay, got it, you're not going. I'll move on and not waste any more time here." And they kept walking. Sometimes attitude is everything. Sometimes you can say a lot with a single word. As a teacher, I never fight to make random kids in the hall follow the rules. It's a bad path to start on. I get enough stress from my own class. I can't help but laugh at the teachers I see constantly yelling at kids in the hall that they don't even know. Story 8. I went to a Catholic grade school growing up that had a strict boys' hair length policy. It couldn't touch the collar of your shirt, and I wanted long hair. So the principal came in one day to talk to the class. When she was leaving the room, she called me out for my long hair in front of my classmates. My response was to point to the cross hanging above the door and said, "Jesus had long hair." She didn't know what to say right away and seemed embarrassed, but then pulled me outside and yelled at me to get it cut. Don't mess with Catholic nuns. You can almost call it a Hail Mary tactic.
Well, once again, I feel like I've said this on this channel so many times, but your problem with trying to address a bad rule in a Catholic school is bringing up the Bible. They don't want to hear about that crap. They just want you to follow their strict rules. Gosh dang it.
Story 9. In my private school, boys were required to wear a collared shirt. It really wasn't enforced until one day it was. I was wearing a sweater without a collared shirt underneath, and I had to go back to the dorm and change. I argued that I didn't look ratty or undressed at all, but they said rules were rules. The next day I wore a white t-shirt with a collar cut off from one of my other shirts stapled to it. It looked terrible, but rules are rules. Do-it-yourself builds. Story 10. In 3rd grade, early 90s, my brother did not want to participate in some sort of multiple class activities. He just hung around the edges until a teacher approached him and told him, "Now, dear, you can't be here without participating." Brother took what she said to heart and waited for a chance to slip away. He made it about 3 miles before a family friend noticed him and drove him the rest of the way home. I remember Mom being pretty upset at him, but even more angry at the school for taking 4 hours to notice he was gone when they took a head count after lunch. One day, my friends and I had gotten to school early for an extracurricular event. After the event, we decided we weren't really feeling school that day and decided to do the 3-hour walk home. One of my friend's mothers saw us about 2.5 hours into the walk. Story 11. Back in the 1980s, there was one kid in my school who was hardcore into the punk scene. Had a bright blue 6-inch high, razor-thin, stand-up straight mohawk. The principal gave him detention for being a distraction, etc., and his parting words that day were, "And tomorrow, no more blue mohawk." The next day, the kid came in with the same mohawk, only bright pink. He should have seen this one coming. Yeah, bright pink mohawk would be pretty difficult to miss. The hawk of the high school is the coolest man to exist.
How dare someone try and rob the 80s of those razor-thin mohawks? How dare that, the principal? Don't you take that away from the 80s? That was precious to us. That and, like the Flock of Seagulls haircut and stuff like that. Why don't you just take the 80s out of the 80s? You can't.
Story 12. No hats in school. In high school junior year, there was this one kid in my grade that was allowed to due to him having alopecia universalis, which is basically having rapid baldness. A new teacher wasn't aware that he was allowed to and asked him to take it off. The kid explained why he was able to, but the sub didn't believe him, forced him to take it off, and was being very cruel to him for wearing the hat / his lack of hair. The next day, everyone wore hats to school as a sort of rebellion against the teacher. She got really mad and started yelling at the students and said some nasty things. She got fired. Story 13. Senior year, my school banned jackets. A friend was cold, wore his jacket to lunch, and the VP told him to take it off. Friend pulled out the student handbook and asked where it said he couldn't wear it. VP flips for a while and ends up showing him the "or anything the administration seems disruptive" clause. Friend rolls his eyes but takes off his coat. The next day, a friend comes in with the same tweed sport coat the VP wore every day. Who the hell bans jackets? My school did once. They said it was dangerous if there was a fire. How the hell they came to that conclusion, I know not. However, the school was really poorly built with concrete walls and next to no heating, so at some times of the year, the indoor heat fell below 15 C. The Work Environment Authority recommends an indoor temperature of 20 to 24 C. We told our teachers to basically either let us wear jackets or fix the heating, otherwise we would report them. They let us wear them. Parents, how did your son or daughter's significant other win you over?
Story 1. My daughter's significant other, gonna call him John, gained my full approval just recently. A little backstory. Me and my wife had an accidental baby just last year. We're in our late 40s, and my family was rather shocked considering we already have a 28-year-old son and a 22-year-old daughter at that point. This may sound strange so far, but it will make sense later. My daughter met John in college and started dating after being friends for a year or so. Didn't take long after that before we met him, and we thought he was a decent kid, if not a bit socially awkward and sort of uncomfortable around us. All of her previous boyfriends were more outgoing, and this kid was quiet. Didn't really think he was going to last. My daughter eventually got an internship out of the country, and now they are LTR. And I was skeptical whether or not this kid was going to stick around. A long-term relationship, I get it. Strangely enough, he visits the house and hangs out with my older son, and we all talk and have dinner together pretty frequently, which is interesting considering my daughter never expected him to do this. I found out that the main reason that he visited us so often was because my daughter was worried that her new little brother would forget who she is while she was gone, so when John would play with our son when he thought nobody was around, he would show him pictures of my daughter making goofy faces and trying to make sure that he'll remember his big sister. When I brought it up with my daughter, she didn't know that John was doing this. That was probably the moment where I started wholeheartedly approving of him. Wow, that's touching. You know, I didn't know where this story was going to go, but that is just really, really sweet and wholesome. John sounds like a pretty stand-up guy from what the little slice that I know about him, but yeah, that's just a really sweet story. What more can I say? Story 2. Not a parent, but a brother. My parents are divorced and remarried, generally don't really get along with their respective ex. My sister and her fiancé had a housewarming party not too long ago and invited both sets of parents along with other family and friends. My soon-to-be brother-in-law and I have always gotten along great, who doesn't love drinking and fishing. So we spent the night just drinking and enjoying ourselves. At one point, though, he and my stepmom are talking, and he calls over my mom into the conversation. I'm standing with my sister, and we're both dumbfounded. Our parents have been divorced for like 15 years, have never spoken to one another, and this guy just pulled two of them together for like a 20 to 30-minute conversation. It absolutely blew my mind. The next morning, while my sister made pancakes and we nursed our hangovers, he told me the entire reason for the housewarming party was to see how my parents would react around one another, and if needed, it wasn't, telling my parents that they're eventually going to have grandkids before long, and if they want to be a part of their lives, they have to act like adults and be okay with seeing their ex every once in a while. The fact he was willing to do that for my sister completely set my mind at ease. I definitely liked him before, but that was the moment I knew he was perfect for my sister. This is my favorite one. I mean, yeah, that shows just kind of an amazing investment into the family and, the family's future together. That's really reasonable and smart, and if those parents didn't get along, that would just be a real pain, because you know what, that's divorce and all that, you can't let that get in the way of the kids' happiness. You gotta find something that works out,
Story 3. I'll tell you the story of how my husband won over my dad. My dad has a sailboat, which he is kind of crazy about. My husband has a background in naval architecture. We went to visit my dad, and while we were on his boat in the marina, the guy in the slip next to us ran over. "My boat is taking on water," he says. "Come help me bail it out." "Don't worry," responds my father. "My son-in-law is a naval architect." Something to note at this point in the story, my now husband and I had only been dating for like 8 months. We weren't even close to getting engaged, let alone married. But now all of a sudden the boyfriend is his son-in-law. So now husband just goes with it. "Sure, I, the son-in-law, will see if I can help." He gets on the guy's boat and sees that there's water seeping through the floorboards. He thinks this is weird given that the pump is going and the boat isn't listing or anything. So he gets down, sticks his finger in the water, and licks it. "It's fresh water," now husband says. "Your bilge is leaking. Did you remember to turn off the hose after you finished filling up your fresh water tank?" And that, my friends, is how my husband became a legend in Dad's marina and my dad's favorite person of all time. Story 4. I know the exact moment I won my wife's family over. I could see it in her father's eyes. It was high school before we started dating. The first time I went over to her house, actually. Her father and 2 brothers are all pretty tall, and I'm average height. It's a very alpha male household, and they have this thing that they like to do to potential boyfriends. So when my wife left the room to go to the bathroom or whatever, all 3 of them stood, lined up shoulder to shoulder, and loomed over me. Blank-faced, glaring down, no words, no motion. Just staring and looming. I found out later that her last boyfriend almost cried when they did this to him. I've always been really socially awkward, but an odd part of that awkwardness is that I'm never intimidated by people. I don't know why, but they just don't frighten me. I slowly stood up, looked them all in the eye, and then poked her dad right in the tummy. I said, "Boop!" He stared for a second, and then a giant grin split his face. It turns out that he's a massive goofball. From that moment on, I was a member of the family. The whole dating and marriage thing was just a formality to them. My word, that mental image made me crack up for the last 5 minutes.
I mean, you won me over. I'm not the dad, never will be, but you've definitely won me over. So, OP for story number 4, by all means, date my non-existent son or daughter. I'm sure they would be happy to have you. You sound delightful.
Story 5. I'm a martial arts instructor, among other things. I caught my daughter's boyfriend looking at my belt rack, 5th degree black belt, and trophies from when I was much younger, and he said, "Are all those yours?" "Yep." "So you know how to throw someone?" "Yep." "Could you teach me?" How much of a setup did I need? I took him into the backyard and threw his skinny butt around for about 45 minutes, and every time he hit the ground, he got back up with a huge smile and said, "That was awesome! Show me how!" So I took him to my class with my daughter and had her practice throwing on him. He never complained, never flinched, and never beat. After class, I told my daughter I liked him, so she broke up with him. That's amazing. Oh, never mind. Story 6. When I was in 10th grade, a guy I liked came over. My dad heard him playing guitar, and apparently that's all it takes for my dad to fall in love. That was the only time we hung out. I'm 31. He still asks about that guy. Dad, you need to get over him already. Story 7. Our daughter came home from college with a boy she had been dating for a few weeks. They weren't serious, but he lived too far away to go home for Thanksgiving. That weekend, her old high school flame dropped by. We didn't like him much. He had been very abusive when our daughter was dating him. When he showed up, he tried to convince our daughter to go someplace with him to talk things over. She didn't want to, so he started getting loud and obnoxious. The new boyfriend was trying to give her some space and not be the possessive caveman type, but when he heard the old boyfriend call our daughter the C word, he came out on the porch and threw a wicked punch at the guy. Unfortunately, he missed and got the worst of the ensuing scuffle before I could break it up. But he got a few good licks in, and I'm pretty sure some of them would leave nice bruises. Not that I condone brawling, mind you. Old boyfriend skulked off, and we brought the new boyfriend in and got him cleaned up. He was only 19, but he got a nice cold beer with dinner. They dated a couple of years, but eventually broke up. She's had a few boyfriends since, but he's the only one I ever addressed as son. Story 8. I was supposed to be one of those good Asian daughters that didn't date until I finished college. I got rebellious in sophomore year and decided to keep dating the guy who took me to winter formal. Mom actually liked him. Dad refused to acknowledge him. One day, my dad mentioned he got a new car stereo and he was going to take it into Best Buy to have it installed. Boyfriend said, "Nope, let me handle it," and spent an entire Saturday afternoon installing the radio and cleaning up the wires in his dash. Dad loved him afterwards, basically treated him like his own son. Parents didn't even bat an eye afterwards when we started living in sin a couple years later, but by that time he was an engineer, we were engaged, and I couldn't give a rat's butt.
Honestly, yeah, if you are having trouble connecting with your, boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, wife, husband, whatever, if you're having trouble connecting with one of their parents, find a project to do with them that you feel that you're both probably somewhat confident on. It's definitely a way that I've connected with my partner's father. We've done a whole bunch of projects together over different Sundays and stuff, and yeah, it's allowed us to become friends. I get along absolutely great with him.
Story 9. I had been casually seeing a guy for a couple weeks when one night we were out to dinner and I was having a particularly homesick night. I live 15 hours from my family and at this point I hadn't seen them in over 8 months. He jokes and said that we should drive home and surprise my mom for Mother's Day that weekend. The next day, we were in the car driving. I've never seen my parents so surprised. Also a little worried. I think their initial thoughts were that something had gone terribly wrong and I was there to deliver the news. My parents have loved him ever since. Story 10. Not quite what was asked, but I knew I was there with my significant other's folks when her dad stopped giving me room temperature beers from the pantry and started giving me cold beers from the fridge. Story 11. Upon meeting my teenage daughter's significant other, she was always embarrassed by me at that time, so she says, "Dad, are you drunk? It's the middle of the day, and of course I wasn't drunk." I hesitate for a moment and then just answer, "Yes." Her new significant other looks at me completely straight-faced and says, "Same." Sense of humor wins me over. Story 12. I won my boyfriend's, now husband's, parents over by throwing a party. It was his birthday and I'd gotten a good number of people to show up for a surprise party. He was on the phone with his parents when he walked in and everyone yelled, "Surprise!" He got all teary-eyed and told his parents, "I have to go, it's a surprise party. I didn't know I had so many friends." For good measure, I sent them photos of the party as well. His mom particularly liked the set of photos that showed my significant other and friends battling a bomb-shaped grill that caught on fire and exploded. Story 13. Apparently making my significant other smile. It seems that it was pretty rare enough for her mother to actually be surprised to see her smile. I like this. Doesn't have to be a big thing or gesture, just a smile. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.